If you're a girls basketball player, or a coach, or a parent of a girls basketball player, this is your week. Because last week, I was talking about boys basketball players and a common mistake that they make when watching game film for their own individual player development. And we know that improving on the court, one of the best ways to improve on the court is by watching game film and improving by learning from that game film. Well, today we're going to talk about how girls basketball players typically approach watching game film, how it's very different from the approach that boys typically take, and some tips to making the most out of your film study sessions. Let's jump in and discuss. Welcome back to Hard Smart Together. I'm Coach Dave. I'm here every week to help basketball players become the smart, confident players that coaches love. So we're talking about film study again, and specifically film study, watching game film, watching your game film for your own individual player development, to kind of see the things that you're doing well, see the things that maybe you can improve upon, and use kind of clips, whether you're doing this on your own as a girls high school basketball player, or whether you're working with a coach or a parent to kind of go through things. As we know, film study is amazing for helping you correct or perfect things on the court, your on-court skills. And we want you making those high IQ, confident, fundamental plays on the court. So I talked last week specifically about boys and how boys and girls high school basketball players have a completely different approach, typically, to the game of basketball. They have a completely different approach to their own individual development. They have a different approach on how they interact with coaches, how they interact with fans, how they interact with their parents, everything around the game of basketball. And yes, they have a completely different approach, and you should have a completely different approach when you're watching game film for your own individual improvement. Because girls and boys, as we talked about last week, are different. So we're going to go into the nuances of how girls typically approach game film and some things to look out for, some gotchas that maybe you aren't thinking about as a player and maybe you aren't thinking about as you work with a player when you're watching film for this individual improvement. Now, before I get into those details, I'd love to give you a free gift just for joining me today. So if you haven't already downloaded the 8 intangible skills, I call them kind of the championship intangible skills that coaches love to see in players. These are things that you can work on in the off season, during the season, whenever. But I put it in a checklist. I give you some ways to work on them, and you can download them by going to the link in the description below, or you can simply go to hardsmarttogether.com/intangibles, and I'll be sure and get you that free gift. So, just like we talked about with boys, what I'm talking about today is in general, right? These are typical. So you might say, that doesn't really apply to me, or that's totally me. I have worked with girls and young women in the game of basketball at almost every level you can, okay? CYO, AAU, high school, college, Division II, Division I. I have helped develop girls high school basketball players throughout the years, okay? And girls players at all level and young women in the college game. And they're different from boys. I notice it because I've worked with boys too, and you can see, and by the way, I am a boy. I know how I was as a player. So you can notice the differences. And I think it's good to know ourselves, to know the players that we're working with, and see, how they think, how they approach these things. So one of the biggest challenges that girls high school basketball players, and really at any level, has especially when watching game film and watching their own game film, is they tend to focus on their own mistakes. Okay? They tend to focus on the mistakes. Why? Because they don't want to let anybody down. So when they focus on the mistakes, they're like beating themselves up about, I don't want to let down my teammates. I don't want to let down my coaches. I don't want to let down my parents. I don't want to let down the fans. I don't want to be embarrassed by my mistakes. So that's what they tend to focus on. Very different from what we talked about last week with the boys. If you want to look at kind of the difference, because boys, as we know, focus on their great plays. They kind of gloss over the mistakes. Whatever, did you see this great play I made? And typically those great plays are not the right plays to focus on because they are, non-fundamental, fan, ego-driven plays. But with girls, it's exactly the opposite. They're focusing on mistakes. Now, last week as well, I gave this huge compliment to boys, high school basketball players. I said how wonderful of a memory they had. Boys have this great memory because they can remember every great play coming down the pipe as you're watching film with them. Every clip. Well, wait until you see what I did, right? Well, girls have just as great of a memory as boys, sometimes better, okay? The only difference is they remember different things. So if I'm watching game film with a girl, she's going, oh no, I know in 2 plays I make a turnover. Oh no, we're getting to that clip where I missed that shot. Oh no, this is where I fouled by reaching. Whatever the mistake is, and maybe they're not even bad mistakes, but believe me, as you're going through clips with a girl, she's already thinking about those mistakes. She's already replaying them in her mind. She's already like, oh, all those people that I let down by making that mistake, okay? The other thing that is typical for girls, and I love this about coaching girls, is all you need to do is give them the reasons behind things, and they're in. They're ready to go, right? So this is the reason that we run this drill, so that they can, there's a good reason behind it, right? Okay? Oh, this is the reason that we're running this play this way. This is the reason that we do, we're developing you this way. This is the reason that we're watching game film. These are the reasons that we're focusing on maybe these mistakes that we want to clean up. And these are the reasons that we want you to make this type of play. This is the reason we want you to make this fundamental play. So girls are great. They'll run through a brick wall for you if you give them a good enough reason, because a little different from boys, right? But they need that reason. So if you're sharing film with a girls basketball player, going through the reasons that you're actually doing the film study, going through the reasons of each thing that you're either critiquing or sharing that they're doing well is really important, okay? Another quick tip. Last week we talked about what kind of clips you should show to boys, and typically, because they don't really care about their mistakes, you should focus on their mistakes and maybe show clips of other players and other teams and other tape that's not necessarily them or their teammates, kind of making great fundamental plays, high IQ plays, because the boy's ego will drive them to, I gotta be better than that guy, right? Girls is almost the exact opposite. I would say you want to tend to limit the amount of mistakes that you focus on when watching an individual player, when watching her game film, okay? Because we already talked about it. They already know all their mistakes. They're going through them in their mind, and all you're doing is just like reliving it, right? You can show mistakes, and you can show a limited number of individual players' mistakes, but typically it's better to show the mistakes that you're trying to clean up that other players, other teams, not necessarily this team, but other teams. Maybe it's film that you got off of online college games, high school games, pro games, whatever it is, but show the mistakes that other players are making, because that takes the heat off of the individual player. She doesn't have to beat herself up over those mistakes. You can still say, now, these are the mistakes we're trying to clean up with you. But you don't have to relive it over and over again with the player that you're working with, or if you're an individual player watching, you don't have to relive all your mistakes. If you're trying to clean something up, watch the mistakes other people make, right? So what do you focus on? Focus on more the positives, the good plays, the fundamental plays, the high IQ plays, the good shot selection, even if it's a mistake, she thinks it's a mistake, but it is a good fundamental play, that's a great mistake to look at, because you can say, this really wasn't a mistake, and explain why. Explain the reasoning behind it. This is the play I want you making. Yeah, it was a turnover, but that's a good play. You went into the lane, you made a jump stop, you were strong with the ball, they just made a great defensive play, and it became a turnover, but that's the play I want you making, right? So with girls, almost exactly the opposite of boys. They remember different things, they have a different approach, they feel differently about watching themselves on film. So you really want to focus on, we're trying to accomplish the same thing. We're trying to use game film in order to help this player improve on the court, in order to help them build their IQ, in order to help them develop into a smarter, more confident player, okay? But you don't want to hurt a girl's confidence by just focusing on her mistakes, no positives, never showing anybody else. It's going to be more detrimental than it will be positive. So that's what I have for you today. Girls watching film, almost completely different from boys watching film. Hopefully this was helpful. If it was, please give me a like. Give me a comment if maybe this is going to change your approach to watching game film going forward as a girls high school basketball player. Please let me know below and how this might help you improve as a player. And until next week, remember to play hard, play smart, and play together. See you next week.